Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the first of two webinars celebrating National Mentor Month. My name is Brady Burns, the National Research Mentoring Network Digital Communication Strategist. Our presenters today are Doctors Antentor Hinton Jr. and Haysetta Shuler. They're here to talk today to you about the role of mentoring in promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion in STEM education and research. Just as a note, we are recording this webinar and we will be posting that to the NRMN YouTube page, and you can find that at NRMN.net on YouTube. If you're not already signed up for our newsletter, you can also do that by visiting the nrmnnet.net website. And during the course of this webinar, feel free to post questions to the Q&A section, and we'll allow time at the end for our presenters to answer any questions that you might have. With all of that being said, I'm just going to go ahead and pass it over to our presenters, our expert panelists, Dr. Antentor Hinton Jr. and Haysetta Shuler.
Thank you for that warm introduction, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm so excited that January is National Mentoring Month, and I just wanted to kick it off with this amazing slide that the National Research Mentoring Network has put together. And one thing that I really like about this slide is it says, show the world how your mentorship has impacted you. And so that's the very first thing about diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and also about mentorship, and then also about outreach. And really, I think the most important thing is to determine your story. Before you start mentoring and can actually engage with anyone else, you have to know who you are as an individual. And that kind of starts with actually knowing what Mentoring Month is about. So the very first thing I would suggest always is actually to understand the who, what, when, why, and where of an argument and how. And so the key thing is before you start becoming a mentor, you should actually investigate what other mentors have done for you and people that you may not even think of as your mentor. I think the very first interactions that we all have with mentorship in any form or fashion is family. And so you could actually look at a parent or a guardian or an individual that served as your, your respective mother's or father from, the church maybe, or from somewhere as a friend in the community that may have been older. So all these can be sources of mentorship. What's fascinating about mentorship is the way that you discover it. Sometimes mentorship is the classical older individual mentoring someone younger, or it could be someone of the same age interacting with you and challenging you on different subjects. I would like to start by telling how I got to become a mentoring expert, I guess you could say. I'm still actually consider myself not a mentoring expert. I think that mentorship is constantly evolving every day, and that we constantly are always growing, and that there's no way that any of us who are mentors should think of ourselves as the end all be all. We all need to continually grow. We all need to continue to read the literature and observe changes and things that could actually benefit us and sharpen us to be better communicators with the public, in addition to our own team, maybe in the laboratory or a group that we're managing with our company. So this is an image of Dr. Morris J. Clark, myself and other WSSU students. Dr. Shuler actually is one of my mentors in addition to Dr. Clark. And I think of a mentor as someone that is a trusted advisor, an individual that trains and advises on various issues around career development, personal challenges or goals, and then professional agenda. And we'll separate these as the talk goes on and kind of give you a little bit more of what's happening in that kind of context. We also believe that a mentor originally was kind of thought of as an individual that gave advice to a younger or less experienced person, especially around an occupation or a trade. What's also interesting about mentorship is that you can discover communication skills through mentors. You also can discover opportunities to meet important people. So for example, when I went back to Winston-Salem State to get the Alumni Achiever Award, Dr. Shuler introduced me to President Allen of Lincoln University. And although she was at Winston-Salem State at some time as the provost, I had some interactions, but not on the same level that Dr. Shuler could provide. So one thing that I like about mentorship is it allows for you to glean wisdom and knowledge and insight and perspective. And so Dr. Shuler told me while I was there, she was like, remember that you should also be thinking about networking. This is not only a way for you to receive an award, but think about who you would like to meet and let me connect you to them. So I think this is the very first nugget of information. A mentor, or that is providing some type of service or mentorship, goes beyond their duty or obligation. And this is something that Dr. Shuler did in this particular example. And so that's why I wanted to use it as an example of how we always may be good at mentorship in some areas, but we always can continue to improve in others. And the next thing that I really like is forging the next generation to be successful. Again, this goes back to this anecdote that I was telling you earlier. Dr. Shuler also wanted me to be successful in multiple ways. She also challenged me to actually gain more advice from the vice chair of the department, which was Dr. Clark. And he was happy to actually impart into me the wisdom that I thought that would, change my life. One of those examples was actually a summer internship. A summer internship provided me the opportunity to understand what it truly meant to be a mentee, and then how a mentee should be able to form a relationship with the individual. Dr. Clark actually went to my very first poster session when I was at the Duke SRP program. He drove 2 hours to actually walk me through my poster, help me present my poster to myself so I could actually have the skill set needed. And then he actually watched on the side and let me present my poster to the audience. And I thought this was amazing. And since then, I've used those same techniques to do really well at posters and also oral presentations. And that same knowledge I imparted on my mentees as well. I think one thing about mentorship is that you should not be limited by someone's community that they belong to. And that's the very first thing I wanted to show you with these slides. I have a wide variety of individuals that I mentor. Some are disabled, some are from different ethnic and racial makeups, and then also some are individuals that are just shy with personality, are not used to interacting with other individuals that don't look like themselves. And so this is where you create community. And this is the beginning of what mentorship and mentee relationships look like. And so when I say mentorship, mentee relationships, is because when you build a community, each individual mentee becomes a mentor to the other individuals because you teach them how to be peer mentors. So first, I should tell you about what a mentee is. A mentee is a person that has been advised, trained, and counseled by a mentor. And a mentor is seen. And what I mean by this is a play on words. It's because in the first slide, I showed you that mentor is seen as in as this particular thing, but the scene is that a mentor is always being watched as a trusted advisor. And so you have to be careful at how you see the world and how the world sees you. You're an example to what the mentee can do. And oftentimes the mentee is not found in the dictionary. In some dictionaries, it's more of a protege or trainee or apprentice. And so we have to also be aware that these different names fall up under the umbrella of mentee. And so above all, a mentee should remember that they're willing to stay humble and teachable. These are the words that I learned most from Dr. Shuler and also Dr. Clark, where they taught me to actually absorb as much knowledge as I could and have the ambition and desire to discover more, and then put it into practice and never give up on sharpening yourself. So I know a lot of times when we're in the laboratory, we have challenges, and mentor relationships are very challenging. And also the challenges that we have at our home life, we bring into mentorship sometimes. So today we'll be actually talking about how to reclaim our time and space and boundaries of being a mentor, the different types of mentorship, and how mentees can learn that the mentor is not, they're not able to have their soul. So a lot of times I think when there's a mentor-mentee relationship, there's a power dynamic, and individuals forget that you own your own soul, you own your own journey, but you have to also realize that the mentor is there to guide you, not take all of the things from you. So it's really a partnership. And when you do the partnership right, you can reclaim your time to actually be successful in any arena that you choose. And a mentor should be willing to forge the relationship. So mentorship should not be somewhere where you're jumping off the cliff just because you took one more step and you're awfulizing, or you're going under circumstances that are really challenging. You're thinking the worst in mind. But the mentor-mentee relationship should start with the forging of the bond, the forging of a relationship. So how do we do that? Well, it's a bond between two individuals that is formed based upon trust. And then also a bond that values respect and time. And it's creating an ebb and flow of information, meaning that there are times where there's reverse mentorship, where the mentee is teaching the mentor something. And that is even a healthy relationship. I also wanted to talk about mentoring can be awkward at first. I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Shuler to talk about it in the general context, and then we'll get back to talking about the specifics that you see below in the bullet points. Dr. Shuler, could you tell us how mentorship could be awkward and how when you're forging a relationship, what are the key things that you look for?
Sure. Happy New Year to everyone who's listening. And again, thank you for being on this call. It has been a pleasure to be a mentor to AJ and so many other students in what some may consider to be awkward. I never did find it awkward being a mentor to any of my mentees. But for some of my colleagues, it was a little awkward, basically, basically because the mentor was not used to either being a mentor or that he or she felt like they did not have the tools necessary to train a new mentee. Another way it could be awkward is because there's lack of communication between both, or sometimes the environment does not allow for new relationships to be established as a mentor-mentee relationship. So in my case, and I wish it's the case for everyone, one of the things I learned to do when I first became an employee here at WSSU was I became a student advocate, meaning that I was intentional about everything or committee or program that I participated in. My goal and desire was to invest in the future. And for me, the best way to invest in the future for a long term was to become a mentor, to become a student advocate. So I intentionally set out to learn how could I best serve the students as a mentor. So one of the things that was key for me was being a having the ability to communicate to students what it is that I knew. Then the other ability was strengthening my willingness to make sure that I shared 100% and I was clear when I communicated to the students. I learned also first to prepare. What do you mean, Dr. Schuler, to prepare? I got to know the students. I went to every Greek meeting. I went to football games, basketball games. I attended student organization meetings, and I wanted to find out what were the needs of the students. So I know all of us can't do that, but at the time I was in a space to do such. And then once I gathered my information, I began to actually literally form my own mentorship program. So then I began to make sure that I assessed myself. What do you mean, Dr. Schuler? Now I'm in a different culture because I came from a business background. Now I'm in a culture setting of education, not only just an education culture, but in a culture that was now basically HBCU, which was rooted deeply in African American roots. And then they also had the traditional white students here. They had Asian students here. There was a lot of diversity, a lot of celebrations of special holidays. So I had to adjust to that culture. It did not change my goals. I just had to learn the culture. Maybe that's a better word. And I made sure that I was approachable and available and willing to listen to students that I desired to mentor. Then there's that focusing on their career plan. I never believe in giving students false hope, but I always saw the potential in students, and I still do. So that means that you have to be honest with the students. There has to be transparency. And we hear that word a lot, but we really, as adults, sometimes don't know how to use it. So I always know how to help students to write their own narrative, their own script, where it is that they want to go. How do they overcome their challenges? How do they start their day and meet not only educational challenges, but social challenges and physical challenges and mental challenges and spiritual challenges? So you become a holistic mentor. And then finally, you have to focus and understand the future of the students and lead them into fields where they can have options. That's one of my key words. AJ have here in this slide, aspiration, but options and aspiration goes hand in hand. And I give you a quick story. I have one student that I mentor, and she had her heart set on being a PhD in biochem, and she went on to graduate school, and I continued to mentor her after undergraduate, and she would come in every 3 or 4 months and say, Dr. Shuler, I'm not sure if I really want to do this. I don't know if I really want to pursue this, and I don't want to waste any time. So we sat down and we went over some career planning, learning her strengths, looking at her weaknesses, learning how to overcome her weaknesses, and how to actually brand and market herself for another direction. Lo and behold, a few months later, she came back and she ran into someone who offered her a position as one of the key patent approvers for the United States. So now she's working in a field that is making not only a lot of money, but it has a lot of meaning to it. And so AJ has as the end point, starting with food, coffee, or tea. And AJ is a true witness. One of the key programs, or one of the key components of my program, is I knew how to attract the students. And how do you attract students to what it is that you have to say, Dr. Shuler? Students love to eat, and we don't just feed with pizza. AJ can attest. We serve them shrimp cocktails, meatballs, chicken. We give them a full dinner, and then we allow them to actually plan the menu, and we paid for it. How do you pay for that? Working at an HBCU, where there are things called grants, and then you go out to your community. You make it part of a community effort, which we're going to talk about later on in the program. And so we never was without food, coffee, tea, and then some more. So you have to make it interesting for the students. Just don't make it an ordinary relationship, but make it a relationship where both the mentor and the mentee, they are both growing professionally and personally. I would go to the next slide. So how do you forge relationships? Mentors, as it says here, should always be able to provide risk management. So what is the risk management? Anytime that you work with the public, there is some type of risk. And for me, I would say one of the biggest risks for me is that sometimes I would get too close to my mentees, and it was becoming like a second mom to some of them. Actually, some of my colleagues brand AJ as my first campus son, because every time something happened with AJ, I would get a phone call, sometimes I would get a pop-up visit telling me what I needed to do with my son. And I was like, what son? And they would say, AJ did this, AJ did that. And so although those were the issues, it actually bonded us closer together. And I got a chance to meet his parents. Most of my mentees, I get a chance to meet their parents. But how do you manage the risk? You make sure there's balance. You make sure there's balance between what it is, how far you're going to go and how far you're going to allow your mentee to go. The other risk becomes is that you make sure, again, to the first slide, be true, be transparent with your mentee, meaning that you're not going to go outside of the ethics and norms of your campus or of your personal goals and values to do anything that will cause them harm later in the future. And what do you mean by that, Dr. Shuler? For for instance, AJ know that he's not going to receive a good letter of recommendation from me if he has not done the work. So again, you want to be true with your mentees. Develop an area where you can be a problem solver and create a vision. So how do you solve problems, where every group of students that I mentor comes with a different set of problems. And so some problems you can solve in advance, but most of the time I think it's better to just be there and to actually hear the problem, have a team to support you when it comes times to solving a problem, and create a vision for what you want your program to look like. I can't create visions for students, but I create a vision for my program, my mentorship program. And I believe that I do not have to have all the answers. And so I believe that I have to build a network myself so I too can involve my colleagues into issues as they come. And then a safe zone. A safe zone is somewhere where students can come and they feel free to discuss anything that is within their on their mind or within their heart. Some people are not good at that, but there are others who are. So again, you build your network, and you may not be the person who feels like you have the time or that you have the desire to even just listen to what students have to say, but you can always point them to that area, to someone else. But I always keep a place available and time available for students, even during the pandemic, to where we can have a safe zone during a Zoom setup or through webcast, where we just set a time when we come online, and I just listen to what challenges they're facing, because as we all know, COVID has presented some challenges here for our students. And then a free place of judgment. I don't too much agree with the word judgment, but I like to say constructive feedback, to where I can give them feedback and say, hey, I hear your idea, I hear what you want to do, but let's consider XYZ. And maybe we need to consider some other things here before we move forward. Sometimes he has seen sometimes leaving mentors on an island that push them out of their comfort zones. And I've only had to be on an island by myself once. I'm always coming out of my comfort zone because the needs are always changing. For once, I have never had I, at first I wasn't sure if I could mentor um, a certain level of students, meaning that I wasn't sure if I could mentor postdoc students, but I come to find out that they were no different than undergraduate students. So going outside of my comfort zone that way was a little challenging, but now it has actually showed me some strengths that I did not know that I had until I actually had to deal with them, or to work with them. I shouldn't say deal. So I think each time that you go outside your comfort zone, depending on what that is, you get better, you get stronger, and you also become a true visionary, where you're just not looking through a tunnel vision at one set of mentees. So AJ, do you want me to go into personal growth and career development?
You can. It doesn't matter. Either one. I know you're on a
Okay.
go, and
No,
then I'll do
I can finish this. So the benefits to the mentee from a good and effective mentor relationship. Of course, there's that professional growth. And I think AJ can attest to how he's grown professionally, not just under my mentorship program, but his entire network. And then there are career development opportunities, where I've had countless numbers of students who are just so appreciative of being mentored by a program here at WSSU. And some are our sister and brother programs that we have joined together since we started the program back in 2007. And then there's a great awareness. It's just like I share with my students, there's the only limitation to your career is you not facing your fears, and you not being aware of the opportunities or options that you have. So always go out there for the internships, shadow the doctors, shadow the nurses, shadow within the biotech community. So I make them aware of all their opportunities. And then I provide them I consider myself part of their GPA system. I help them to navigate towards the success that they so desire. And then when the students or my mentees see that I have great confidence in them, it also helps to strengthen their confidence. And once they take that first step and they see that the possibilities and the potentials within their set and within themselves, they are just ready to fly. They're soaring like an eagle. And so then again, you can be a sounding board. You not be, but you are that sounding board. And I have students that call me and they just want to talk, and I'm just actually listening. And then they're asking a question, but then they're actually resolving their own issue. And then you can just bolster your confidence by when you just know that you have put forth a good effort and you've made a great investment into the future, whether it's within the science, whether it's within healthcare, whether it's with engineering, but you have made a great investment. Dr. Shuler, what kind of investment is that? You have put your time and effort into your mentee, and now the mentee is on his and her way into making a difference in society. And we know that I can say and boast about our students that they are making a great contribution to societies, making society better in every area of the health field, in science, and in engineering. So I'm glad to be able to boast about not only my confidence, but theirs. And we have built a gigantic network, and I'm continually looking at how I can make it bigger. Again, as I said before, the only limitations that you have is the ones that you put on yourself. I am so proud that we have built that network for the mentors and for the mentees, and it is just priceless. Let's go to the next slide.
So benefits to the mentee are very interesting. So I wanted to elaborate on the story that Dr. Shuler alluded to. So I may not have always been an expert mentor, as you guys have found out. So the reason that I wanted to share this place with Dr. Shuler is because I want you guys to also learn that mentorship is a two-way street. I'm constantly learning from Dr. Shuler. And even as the time grows on, it's been more than 15 years, I'm still learning new things from Dr. Shuler. For example, we're learning how to manage other individuals because I'm opening a lab at Vanderbilt. And so we're already discussing about risk management. We're already discussing about communication, professional and personal skills. But the key things that we're learning about also from each other is about how to resolve conflict when there's differences in ideas, how to really take your level of confidence into new directions. And one thing was when I was at Winston-Salem State, I was not always the most, I guess, well put together individual. I was very interested in discovering lots of different things and going around and doing different places, going to this internship, going to this, speaking my opinion about different things, and also challenging professors about, the concept of science. I really would challenge professors, and when they came to speak, I would challenge their research. I was never set on the context of like, okay, you're telling me this, do we have to believe it? And so although the questions were great, they were a little out of turn. And so one thing that Dr. Shuler did for me was sharpen me so that I could ask questions in a different way that didn't cause risk management to be alerted in everyone's mind, because somehow I was blessed with the ability to see holes in different research agendas and see how you could actually better them. And I had to learn how to ask questions so that I could protect the relationships that I needed later on when I was networking. And so that was something that I valued very much. And then now I'm able to dodge bullets, kind of like how Neo did in the Matrix, or most of them. And then sometimes you still need a mentor to kind of help you to kind of re-strategize when a personal relationship or academic issue comes up. And you really can avoid fights. You can see them ahead of time. And that's why I really like this little animation or meme at the bottom, is because sometimes you think you have to fight to succeed, but other times you have to realize that your mentor has already set up a plan for you if you can kind of follow the strategies. But also the downside to being a mentee is also learning how to be a mentor. So from the same experience, mentees have to learn how to glean skill sets so that they can become their own individual mentor. So although Dr. Shuler trained me, like Dr. Shuler also mentioned, was there's a network of individuals. So I align myself with Dr. Shuler, I align myself with Dr. Clark, I align myself with Dr. Abel, I align myself with other individuals as well that I'm not going to mention because I have about 40 plus standard mentors in my network in addition to my own network. And so one thing that I learned was how to provide lineage, meaning that you may have a mentee and you introduce your mentee to the mentor that trained you. So a good example of that is I have a mentor named Dr. Sandra Murray, who's at the University of Pittsburgh. And she's introduced me to her network, and my student interacted with her at Abercams. She was so impressed with her. She says, you know, I really am proud of what you're doing. And she said, we're not going to spend time with, you know, you and I are not going to spend time. I'm going to spend time with your mentee. Just want to see how you're mentoring, what your mentee's doing. And that year, my mentee won Abercams in the cell biology section. So I was very happy. So I was like, this is a good representation of what I'm doing, but also a good representation of what she will become. And so now she's my most challenging mentee to work with. And the reason I say that is because I got to make sure that I'm reading. The way that I asked questions a long time ago is the way that she asks questions now. And I'm super excited about it. It holds me accountable. And so that's why I said that a mentor has to continue to reevaluate their own skill set to make sure that they're ready to mentor the next generation. Also, a mentor should be able to encourage leadership amongst future colleagues. And that means actually challenging your students to be able to train them to take your place one day. And so that's how I train my students. My training is a lot of unorthodox strategies, but one thing that's in my toolkit that I take personally is actually making my student better than me. It may take 1 year to get my student to get on that trajectory. Sometimes it may take longer. I have another example of a student that I trained at Baylor when I was in graduate school, and now he's in medical school, but it took him 2 extra degrees to get there. It took him his undergraduate degree, he did a master's degree, and then he did a post-bac. And then now he's in medical school. And we actually met earlier in the year just to evaluate his performance, where he's working, what he's thinking about for fellowship. He's already thinking like, I want to work in your lab at Vanderbilt for fellowship. I was like, well, let's you know, first get through medical school, then we can approach the strategy. But the thing is that you support your mentees in their development. And a mentor also has to learn how to have their own support team. A mentor cannot only give all the time. They have to have their own set of individuals that can actually sharpen them and have a place to be a human being. Because if you're not being a good human being, or you're not approaching your own personal issues, you cannot build a better human being within your own individuals that you're training. Also, I would really highly suggest that a mentor learns cultural awareness practices to be able to be prepared to support the individuals that may not be from the same background as you. And that's very important, and it's often not thought of because we think that one mentoring style fits all mentees. And that is not the case. You have to learn how to create an environment that's for that mentee to thrive. It's very interesting because in the laboratory, usually at one time I have anywhere from 1 to 12 students. Later in the slide, you'll see me with 12 students on Zoom, and they're in various locations, but they're working on different projects. And so what's interesting about this is that each individual has their own tailor-specific mentoring team and their own tailor-specific mentoring strategies to enforce what are their goals. So sometimes certain mentees will work together because one doesn't know a technique, and I do that on purpose because some people are very shy and don't want to speak up, and others are very extroverted. So I have them work together to find a common middle ground to actually offset each other's personalities. So there's a whole variety of different things that you can do. And when it works right and it's a safe zone and a comfortable zone, then others can actually exchange knowledge, and the mentor can continue to exchange knowledge and watch how others are cultivated. And it's a key strategy because the roles of a mentor are very wide and vast. They can be a teacher, they can be a guide, a counselor, a motivator, a coach, an advisor, sponsor, role models, and an advocate. And if you remember, we cover that in effective mentoring. So we won't cover that today. We're actually going to cover the types of mentoring. So I would suggest you go back to our seminar that we did last year on effective mentoring to find out the roles of mentorship. And then also the things that encompass when you're a different mentor about like tokenism, unconscious bias, stereotype threat. These things can be found there to actually enhance your toolkit so that you're prepared and aware of different strategies and roles that a mentor can play, and how sometimes you may not be the expert on that particular role to actually give the mentee the best advice. So don't be afraid to actually have a mentor. All of us as mentors not know everything, and actually advise them to go to someone in your mentoring network that may be more comfortable or capable in that skill set. So today we'll actually talk about the types of mentoring. And then after we get into the types of mentoring, we'll start talking about some community outreach efforts and how to organize some. and we'll go from there. So basically, I'm going to subdivide each section and work with Dr. Shuler on these. And what's interesting is we're showcasing some of the papers that we've done on some of these areas. And the next time that we talk, we hopefully the other ones will be in print, but they're already submitted for the next set of lectures so that you can kind of see some of the material that we've been working on and researching. Well, and just in general, there's different types of mentoring. And right now, e-learning or virtual mentoring is really the hot thing, but it's been around for years. And I think a lot of individuals may not be aware of that. And one-on-one mentoring is a specific type of mentoring: situational mentoring, reverse mentoring, group-based mentoring, peer-based mentoring, and career mentoring. So we'll cover most of these today in more detail. So we'll talk with the types of virtual mentoring. So Dr. Shuler has expanded her network. So she was talking about mentoring postdocs. Well, she mentors me, and sometimes she may forget that, you know, I'm learning mentorship at every stage from her. And so what's interesting is then I showed her some of my network. And what was very interesting was that everyone is like, wow, we love Dr. Shuler. Can she be our mentor too? So then we started to actually work together during the pandemic, and we formed a group called the Community of Scholars. So it was originally thought of an idea with me and Melanie McReynolds, or Dr. Melanie McReynolds. If you just guys don't know, she's also a PhD, and everyone in this picture is. But Dr. Melanie McReynolds is at Princeton, and she's a Howard Hughes medical investigator. She's a Hannah Grace Fellow. And we decided to converse at a conference that I was one of the keynote speakers at. And we talked, and she was like, we got to start writing. I was like, I agree. We got to get our ideas down and conceptualize them in a way that is accessible to the public. And so what we did was we worked with a lot of these journals to make some of these articles open access, and we're still working with some of them to make others open access. But the idea is so that the wide community can have a resource that they can use to actually help the public grow as they contribute to scholarship within the community. So this particular article is called "The Art of Virtual Mentoring in the 21st Century of STEM Majors and Beyond." So we talk about the strategies of in-person mentoring versus virtual mentoring and how we can enhance our virtual mentoring skill set. So one thing is that when Dr. Shuler learned also that she could mentor postdocs, she also realized that she could mentor postdocs to faculty positions, because several of the individuals on the line are now in faculty positions, such as Dr. Brittany Taylor. So the reason that this is important is because while we were working on the paradigm for the 21st century mentoring during the pandemic, I was practicing also virtual and e-learning or distance learning myself with my own mentees. So what I'm trying to say is that mentorship is an ebb and flow. It constantly continues for you to grow, and it also allows for you to expand your network. So what's interesting is that when we're learning about how to have effective virtual mentoring, we also have to think about sometimes on LinkedIn, when we're at LinkedIn, we may want to meet an individual that we really don't know about or have never seen before. And this particular way, we're able to do that. Now we actually don't have a barrier that's in place. So actually the other day I met with Dr. Antonio Zorzano, who's in Spain, because Margaret is going there to do some research. So we actually set up a team together, a group mentoring strategy of how we'll mentor her while she's there and where she's at now. And I currently have a mentoring strategy with Margaret and another professor, Dr. Lewis at Berkeley, for her mentorship as well, where we have another project that we're working on. So you see, virtual mentoring has a way to actually break down barriers of where you may have before not been able to meet, or you have been able to meet, but you weren't aware of the tools that were available to you. So sometimes it's the latter. And then also it removes the limits of meeting an individual. Virtual mentoring is a fabulous way to be able to understand how to create better flexibility within your meeting times, and then also create better flexibility in understanding the creativity of what can actually happen in a virtual meeting. Also, what's interesting is about virtual meeting, it makes you more efficient with your time, and you're more organized because there's only a limited time frame which individuals have for meetings. Sometimes in a person-to-person meeting, they'll go over, they're more loose, but you have to be very well organized and get to the point about what you need to do while you're on a virtual event, even like this for today. I also want to bring to the attention of everyone is that it will increase your mentoring network because you're able to identify with individuals. It's very easy to Skype. I've set up individuals on Skype. I've set up individuals on Zoom or Blue Jeans, and I use them interchangeably. So one thing that I suggest as the world continues to evolve, that we get more acquainted with virtual mentoring and that you use the resource that we provided here in this paper to do that. There are also other resources as well. We don't want to be biased. There are a lot of literature that's out there, and there's other sources that you can look at the reference list and actually look at those as well. But another thing that I want to promote here is that virtual mentoring can serve the community for more outreach on diversity and inclusion. Right now, I'm doing a conference that was put together between me and other individuals, and we're joining online. So it's very important to be aware that you have greater access to the community. And what I mean by the community is the world. So one other type of mentoring is one-on-one mentoring. One-on-one mentoring is very interesting because this kind of gets into understanding that you can have tailor-specific mentoring. This is what we talked about earlier, not being afraid to mentor people that don't look like you. This was a concept that also Dr. Shuler and I came up with, and something that we wanted to kind of enlarge our territory and help others enlarge their territory about mentoring minority trainees. But some of these strategies also are effective at mentoring people that may not be a minority as well. Dr. Shuler, could you talk about these next two slides in the context of mentoring minority trainees and why one-on-one mentoring can be very important and specific?
Sure, and thank you, Dr. Hinton. So, as we know, one-on-one mentoring is just between the mentor and a mentee without a without a group. And so one of the components that I think is very important when you're doing a one-on-one mentoring is that first the mentee is receiving a lot of attention, and sometimes you can have it in a formal setting or informal setting. And so when you're mentoring one-on-one, I think you want to actually just make sure that you are capable of mentoring this individual. And again, if you're not, please do not be afraid to send or ask someone else to mentor the individual, because again, you do not have to have all the answers, but you must be willing to serve, because as a mentor you are serving. And so I think you will be in a better position to help guide their path as to which career area they want to go in, or should they go back to school before actually signing into a position. And then again, that personal relationship, it is on a stronger, or it's more like a family relationship, because that person becomes you becomes that person go to more than once. And so it can be a lifelong relationship, which most of my mentoring experiencing has become. It is lifelong. And so you do have this framework where you can talk about, as you see in the at the bottom of your screen, it is easier to talk about some of your internal and external issues. And as we can see, I'm not going to name them all. Where we see, do you have to have cultural competency? Then you have there is the encouragement. You have that unbiased support. You deal with microaggressions and macroaggressions. And then you have some issues where students have experienced that imposter syndrome. Then we have goal settings in our conversation, and you have your training, and you have your achievable deadlines. And what I'll usually do is set students up with an IDP plan. And I think, and I don't see this on this slide, but I think that is so critical when you're mentoring anyone, whether it's one-on-one or within a group session. Why? Because you always will have a chance to look back to see what obstructed you from not achieving your goals this week or this month. And then you go back and you look at ways on how to overcome those challenges, and not to stifle your growing, or to stifle your achievements, but learning how to incorporate, take those lessons learned as this experience of growth. Because sometimes without those failures or those challenges, you don't grow to be the best that you can be. And also mentoring 101 gives you the ability to have a voice. What kind of voice, Dr. Shuler? You have that voice again where you're speaking truth. The limitation of availability for a mentoring is sometimes it can be a little awkward, but I try to give each mentor or excuse me, each mentee at least 45 minutes to an hour, and so many times a week. And so, as AJ has said, I have already started a formal program, and I think that is actually where the program here at WSSU started. It started from a 101 session, and believe it or not, that 101 session was with Dr. Hinton. And so we actually have to take our hat off to him. Go to the next slide. Okay, the types of mentoring, reverse mentoring, and I think we can because of time, we're going to make this our last mentoring type of mentoring slide here and move to the community projects. But the reverse mentoring is, I'm just going to sum it all up, is where I have learned so much from AJ or Dr. Hinton as much as from my postdocs that I'm working for. And so what they're actually doing is just using the tools that I have shared with them and has been proven to work through scientific data and through just personal experiences. And they're now using those same tools to encourage me, to push me forward. Because when I was actually began working with AJ, I just had completed my master's degree and I was happy, but it was because of his graduating class and a class after his that encouraged me. Miss Shuler, you need to go and get your doctorate. Why, guys, do y'all want me to have a doctorate? I really, I'm fine without a doctorate, but they saw a vision that at that time I could not see. And so now I'm glad that I did go forth, earned my doctorate, and now I'm doing so much more, not only on a personal level, but for my mentees as well. So let's go to the next slide on community. Dr. Hinton? We can't hear you.
Sorry, I just been talking and going to the next slide. I didn't realize I was on mute. I apologize. So what I was saying was that sometimes when you are doing different types of mentorship roles, such as reverse or group mentoring, and then also peer mentoring, and also um, situation like career developing mentoring, you're able to come up with different types of strategies that you can use in the public's eye. And so sometimes remember that when you're working in the public, you want to make a checklist because it's a kind of an agreement of what you guys will work with and then who in the community that you can work with to be able to do those specific goals. And remember that you don't want to spend too much time because sometimes individuals will take advantage of your time because you are focused on really helping and you have a heart to help. So you have to be careful about how much time that you give individuals and specific things about what you say. And you have to address those things always in some type of written or form of communication so that there are business transactions. Even if you're volunteering, remember it's a business transaction is something that you have to establish boundaries for. So remember, you can refer back to the article of Power Saying No to come up with some tools when you need to learn how to say no. So STEM education outreach is something that's a play on words. I do want to put in the disclaimer. I'm not a STEM education expert. I don't do STEM education research. And that I also want to say that I'm just a scientist willing to help the public. And yes, I've had a lot of experience in helping and other individuals will put me in magazines, whether it's Iowa's magazine or Forbes magazine about these different things. But the key thing is that you want to inspire. You don't want to be focused on the content of the glamour about mentorship. You actually want to do different initiatives and focus your efforts on one initiative at a time, or set up a team that can actually help you to carry out different initiatives. Because a lot of times when you're doing these various different initiatives, they take a lot of effort. And you want to be aware that sometimes it's better to do things in a team and that each individual takes a certain part of the mentorship style. So that's why we're going over different types of mentoring, because sometimes you may need career mentoring advice on how to run a program such as the Black Queer Town Hall in STEM that's going on actively right now, where we partner with RuPaul's Drag Race contestant Peppermint and Bob the Drag Queen, who had won the show. And so we had to learn how to have business mindsets. Mr. Ryan Daniels, who's at Penn, who I work with, a graduate student, to come up with this paradigm to be successful. So everyone sometimes needs to have situational mentoring where it's specific goals oriented. You come up with a plan of action and you can focus. Or there's other times where you have career mentoring where you're giving mentorship advice to individuals to run the Black and CMDB Bio Week online on Twitter. And sometimes you have to step in and do different things at different points where you become a peer mentor, other times where you're actually the mentor. And then there's cases where you actually learn how to develop companies. So for example, out of the community of scholars, I realized that there was a need to actually have a consulting company. You can't share all of your gems for free. So then you learn how to have business mindsets. So you learn that from Dr. Shuler, and because she has a consulting company. So I learned how to have a consulting company. Now I have one with Dr. Edgar Garza Lopez to be able to carry out some of the work. So what I'm trying to tell you is that you have to have a right mindset to be able to balance between what you give for free to the community and what you don't, or what you also are able to put your time and effort towards. And it's really important to be able to do certain things because it actually is the purpose of all of this is to give back to the community. So this is our first example. And I'll tell you how we're able to create these mentoring workshops where we also create undergraduate or high school summer experiences with different experiments. And how we also did some things that we won't tell you in detail. For example, how to run an entire science program online during COVID. That's something that we've collected data on and we'll publish first, and then we'll be able to talk about that. But basically, we ran a summer program for the University of Hawaii. We did 6 lectures. And actually the students this year, out of that, 2 of them received enough mentorship to actually win at ABRCAMS again. And if you're not familiar with ABRCAMS, it's the annual biomedical research conference for minority students. So what we did was we took 2 individuals from, well, there were 7 in total, but 2 of the individuals really asked for a lot of mentorship. And Kaylee had a different project, but she received the mentoring skill set to be able to be prepared to present and do well. And then they also have data sets. And from these data sets, one of the individuals, Michelle, used that data to be able to come up with a poster, and she analyzed it and did all the analysis on her own, and she was able to win in the computational section. So what I'm trying to tell you is that there are ways to be creative and come up with outreach, but it starts with understanding the public. So basically, there's always a choice. You can always think about things of being on the good side or the evil side, right? I like to use analogies from movies. And the reason I do this is because sometimes you can be the good guy and the bad guy at the same time if you're not setting up trust within the community. And one way to set up trust in order to be able to really do true outreach is to watch what you tweet. A lot of individuals tweet a lot of things that can be polarizing, whether it's on the right, the left, or even the neutral or the middle. You have to be very careful about what you say because people are watching you, and what you say can dictate how people perceive you. And so if you're going to reach out to the community and the public, remember that you have to give the best facts as possible, and they can't be things that are not fact checked. So it's all built on trust. And so without proper trust, it does not form policy, because the people that are actually voting, they have to be able to trust you. So one thing is that if you're trying to reach out to a community, just one quick tip. If they're African-American, you may want to work through the churches. That's something that's kind of generally known, but it's how you do it. And those are strategies that you can find out, through my consulting company, for example. But the idea here is that you have to focus on trust and trustworthiness in the context of not forcing an issue or trying to get an agenda put together. It has to be something that's really mutual and beneficial for both. And remember, public trust is like a spider web. It's very delicate. Sometimes it's good enough to catch some insect inside for a meal, but at the same time, it could be deadly because it actually could fall apart. And then you have to start all over. And remember that everyone is connected in the public eye. There's really truly like 6 degrees of separation, but sometimes it's a lot closer. And so individuals really know each other, and that the public will talk based upon how you do with that individual. So remember, think of a spider web as individuals of people and the network that they're in, because they really are important for your success when you're reaching out to the community to do STEM outreach. So again, there's an issue of diversity going around a lot. And I want to get kind of away from using diversity, equity, inclusion. I just want people to realize that everyone's an individual and everyone has to learn from cultural competence training to respect each individual's traditions and values. And when you're able to do that, you can realize that there's diversity. I really like this quote from Johnny Cage. It may seem childish to you, but it actually embodies what it should be and how it should look like when the United States is working together. So it says, we got a guy that with things that come out of his hands, that's Scorpion. We have another guy that freezes things, that's Sub-Zero. And then there's a guy, man, who's made up of electricity, and that's Raiden. And then you also have the Mortals. So now you have 4 different classes of individuals, but they're all working together to be able to come up with solutions to a rim issue. It may not look right where one perceives as the bad guys, other perceived as the good guys, but there are alternative solutions to actually creating public trust and diversity within the public eye. So you have to remember that people look into your soul all the time, as what Raiden said, and remember the fate of an individual actually is dependent upon you as a one person, because if you impact one person, that next person can impact another person, and it'll eventually get around to the billions of people. So the character and the content of your heart is what values most when you're having outreach. So now, what are the solutions to making outreach? So we're going to give you just a couple. So Dr. Shuler and I created a couple of posts related to the 1,000 Black Scientists list. You can do outreach in different ways, and it's the idea of having multiple ideas, but knowing how to tailor one and come through with that particular goal. So I want to tell you about this because there's a story behind this list. It ended up in Excel Press's Cell Mentor, but there were other journals that could have had it at the same time when we were negotiating with individuals, and it actually took a year. So although it was published in 2020, it took almost a year to actually create, because individuals were planning with me. There was a planning committee to actually put these individuals on together so that we were choosing individuals that the world would see for the first time as the optimal Black scientists that were out in the public eye, and then the ones that had accomplished a lot. And then we also wanted to show a variety of institutions that were carrying Black individuals. So it takes a lot more effort than putting a list together. You actually have to do data-driven analysis, meaning you have to go through and figure out how many people have publications, where are those publications at, how you can have a good representation of what a Black scientist is in America. So there's a lot of thought process put in these things. And then sometimes when you do research, you have more than the 100 Black scientists that you can come up with. So we did a follow-up post. And the reason I showed these particular posts, and I did a screenshot because now the information is private for how many likes, because we started to receive too many and a lot of other comments. So what we did was I just wanted to show you that this reached 8,200 people for what I can tell you. The blog itself actually reached a lot more people, but this is the time when it came out. So remember what I said, one thing, if you focus on it and actually come up with an identity for that one thing and carry it out, then you're able to actually reach a lot of individuals. So now individuals may have a different perspective of what a Black person is and what they can do in science. And remember, just like in the civil rights movement, it's not one group or community of individuals that you have to advocate for. You have to advocate for everyone that's diverse, but it does start with ethnicity and race. So one thing that we did was we actually petitioned Cell Mentor to actually have a 100 Hispanic Latinx scientists in America list. Everything is by choice, but everything is also intentional. That was one of the mentoring tips. The reason we started with this is because sometimes you may have an idea for doing it, but you may not be the best fit to carry this out. And so the best person to carry this out was Tina Termini, who is actually Hispanic in origin. And so she worked with us and she helped develop a group of individuals that were from various Latinx or Hispanic backgrounds to help us to carry out this list so that we could, one, actually have the approval of the Latinx community and Hispanic community, but two, also be able to help share the limelight on Latinx and Hispanic scientists that are changing America as well. So you have to remember that if you have another idea, tailor it specific to the individuals that are able to carry these things out, and also work with them to foster the right relationships and nurture them so that you can actually be strong at making a plan of action, because everything has to be intentional. Also, then from all the different individuals that we met in the network, we worked with the community of scholars, which is part of the individuals that I had mentioned earlier from the virtual mentoring paper. We worked on this 1,000 Black scientists list. And like I told you, we stopped showing how many likes. So some of the data that I can share with you is that there was 34,000 plus likes on this post. And there was 1,000 likes on a Twitter post. And it got retweeted 721 times. And the reason I say that is because that's a large number for a scientist. Scientists, there are some scientists that actually have a very beautiful public following, but there's some that don't. And I'm excited when I reach more than one person with a post, because the intentionality behind why I post things is not because I want to create, all the success and stardom. It's to actually focus on an issue and carry it out. So these are 3 or 4 examples of how you can actually support individuals from diverse backgrounds, but also create STEM outreach. Now, why is this important? How do you take this and develop it into a new idea that can be sponsored? Well, you have to go back to the literature. Dr. David Asai created a term that is now the more best term or the most considerable term to understand what a minority is. So this came out in Cell in 2020, and he came up with the word called peer, persons excluded from science because of ethnicity or race. And so that encompasses a lot of different minority groups. So then you ask the question, well, how can you actually put this back into the science arena? Well, you go and look at the statistics of what's happening with individuals that are from diverse backgrounds that are receiving money. And one of the papers that came out in Science was demonstrating that African Americans were 10 percentage points less than whites to be awarded an R1. So how can I help besides just doing my research and doing a great job as a professor at Vanderbilt and finishing up my postdoc here at Iowa? Well, one thing I can do is actually create a paper that demonstrates where the leaks are in the pipeline and then go address them. So Dr. Shuler and I and other individuals created a article about where the pipeline had leaks and where we thought that we could revitalize the pipeline. So then taking this information, we found that at the undergraduate or before the undergraduate level or the postbac level, these are areas that we could focus on. So we actually went back to understanding advising. So we went back to Dr. James Phillips, who actually published a paper, a paradigm that talked about how to do Saturday morning science. Basically, it's where you actually recruit middle school and high school students to come on a weekend at a university and actually be able to do some type of research experiment. Well, I used to do this program when I was at Baylor College of Medicine, obviously here. I was all young. And so the reason I showed some of these pictures is because if you notice in the back, there are so many individuals that are from diverse backgrounds. And so what we tried to do was actually reach so many individuals. And if you realize you can partner with anybody to do great science and partner with anybody to do STEM outreach, they just have to have a heart that is willing to actually help. So if you notice, this group of individuals are the ones that were the volunteers that actually did the programming. They don't all look like me. They all have to just work with each other to find their happy median so that you can do outreach. So what we did was we wrote a grant to Bureau's Welcome Fund to actually come up with similar programming. So the idea here is to actually take what we would do normally in the classroom or in the setting when there was before the pandemic and actually do it in the virtual arena. So what I wanted to share here is that there are certain strategies about communication over virtually that I would like to let Dr. Shuler talk about next, because I've talked about some of these things. So Dr. Shuler, could you talk about replicating programs and acquiring mentoring?
Yes, and we're going to be quick on this, Dr. Hinton, because we're over our time. It's actually 1:05.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. But yes, very quickly, to replicate a program and what everything that we've learned with over the years, it actually requires just doing one, assessment. Number two, reaching out to your community, wherever that may be. You look and see what are the needs of the community. How do you do that, Dr. Shuler? One, by connecting with some community leaders, as Dr. Hinton has already mentioned. Most of the community leaders in this area are heavy within the church setting. We have our mayor, which I also serve as on one of the committees for the mayor, so that gives me a little upper hand. I also reach out to our public school systems to make sure that I'm hearing from them to see if it's anything that we can do and from our mentorship program to help our public schools. Because when we think about it, it is the students from the public schools that are going to hopefully enroll into undergraduate and graduate programs. So anytime we can set up or partner with anyone within a community and serve as mentors or to serve them in whatever capacity that we're capable of is always a win-win situation. And I think it is so important that we as mentors train our mentees or encourage our mentees to give back to the community in one way or form. And as Dr. Hinton has said, there is more than one way to give back, to create programs, to make it known to the public as to what you're about. Invite them into your sessions. Invite them into your strategy when you're having a strategic session. Hear from your community, because we may come up with ideas that may sound good to us, but if we're not meeting needs, ideas are just that, they're just ideas. So you want to make sure that you're learning what the needs are within your setting. So you want to go to the next slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you want to talk about your data here?
Yeah. So this is just a snapshot to demonstrate how effective some of the things that for the community, how effective some of the strategies that we use for the community can be. And one of those strategies is actually just simply evaluation. So when we did some evaluations on pre and post questions from some of these surveys on one of the particular things that we did, we were able to demonstrate that some of the post questions, these are just a sample of some of them. Obviously they're labeled 1, 9, and then also 13 and 7. You can see that there's an improvement in confidence and understanding, and then how to actually be informed and have new networking skills. So these strategies are actually effective, and we're really excited about what we're doing. And then lastly, we just wanted to say that there's other ways to reach the community. Go back to your hometown, wherever you received your upbringing from, and give back. I'm from Almanance County, where my father's from, and my biological father and my grandmother stay there. And so it's very interesting. I try to go back and give back when I can. I'll go to the local church. I'll also give back by doing embracing the community with science there, because there's not a lot of Black and Hispanic individuals that graduate high school even. But I'm trying to make a difference with the community, with the medical bridge program that's there, that's done with Scott, and Almanance County is doing a great job, and they already are partnering with UNC Chapel Hill to do this. And then lastly is just educating individuals in the way that they're able to be educated. And I just wanted to tell you that you have to sometimes use what people know. Well, that's all I want to end on today. I just want to say thank you for your time. We'll be able to take questions quickly, and sorry for going over. And the last thing is I hope that everyone's enjoying this National Mentoring Month as much as I am. And now I hope that you have some tools to get started on formulating an idea of how to reach out to the community. Thank you.
Thank you both so much, so very much for your presentation. So for the audience members, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A now. So far, we've only had 2 responses. So someone had asked if they could receive the recording of the presentation. And if you look in the Q&A section, I put the link to our YouTube page that this will be uploaded to. And then someone also said yes, praising the presentation. That was from Samuel Ball. So definitely some great information from you all. And I'll just allow a few minutes in case there are any additional questions that anyone has at this time. Okay, so I have a question from Amelia. It says, for research on ethnicities within STEM, are there resources that you can use that you can share with us here?
Dr. Shuler, do you want to answer the question, or do you want me to answer the question?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. Repeat that, Brad.
Absolutely, I can repeat it. For research on ethnicities within STEM, are there resources that you used and can share with everyone?
Sure, I actually don't have the paper, or actually it's a book. So I would refer you to the site net. website, and you can type in just type in ethnicity, and there are countless numbers of research papers there. We also have a ethical book, Ethical Standards in Education and Research, that we use, and I'm trying to find it as we speak. Hold on one second.
All right, while you're finding that, Dr. Shuler, if you could also either send the link to me.
Thank you. It's Everyday Ethics by Catherine Bird, and that is, excuse me, Catherine Beard, and it is spelled B-A-I-R-D, and it is on Amazon, I do know, and for a very inexpensive price. Again, the name of the book is Everyday Ethics.
And you said it
And
was
it's a,
Catherine Beard.
uh-huh.
So I'm just going to go ahead and put that in. All right, we had another question come in from Gloria. She said, what community resources or specific examples were you able to leverage early on in developing your mentorship network?
One of the things I connected, sources that I used was I connected with the city of Winston-Salem. And one of the programs that the city of Winston-Salem offers is they have Adopt a Street activities. They have Adopt a Neighborhood, Adopt a Garden, Adopt a, I think it is a community. So I participated in Adopt a Street, and what that entails is that a group of students, along with myself, we got together like once a month, and we went to certain neighborhoods, and we would actually clean the street, meaning that they provided us with trash bags and vests, and we cleaned up the streets. We just picked up trash, not big trash, and we actually took time to actually speak to the neighbors, and most of the, or excuse me, the residents in that area. Most of the residents were elderly people, and so we got a chance to also put our name up on this little sign that says the name of our organization, and that became well known. And so when each time the parade took place, it was something that was broadcast on TV. We also adopted a garden where it was a community garden, and we went out every season to plant, and then we would actually take the food that was raised in the garden and we would give it away to local food banks, or sometimes we would just set up an area on a specific side of town, and we would just give our produce away. And then there are also programs that you can, we use through the YMCA. We also connected with some of the activities from different within different church settings, such as we performed a choir, we participated in a play. And so it's just countless numbers of things that you can do throughout your city.
Wonderful. Dr. Shuler, you mentioned a search engine before. Can you repeat what the name of that search engine was?
PsychNet.
Okay, wonderful.
And as we close, because I don't think there's any other questions, I wanted to tell everybody, oh, there's a question, but I'll just say it really quickly. I wanted to tell everyone that you have to build trust within the community. So it takes time before the community will trust you to be able to do things. And so that means that actually putting in a lot of effort to be able to consistently be involved, sometimes before you're able to even lead a program. So I just wanted to let everyone know that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And then we have just one last question. On one of the slides shared NIH statistics on ethnicities that entered into STEM fields, then finding those are counted into 100 Inspiring Black Scientists in America campaign. So the question is, where do you go to find that information?
Are they asking where do you go to find information on the list of scientists, or how did we put the list together? I'm not sure.
have to get clarification on that from the question asker. Amelia, if you could provide clarification on what exactly you're wanting to know. She's asking how those are added to your list.
So that's something we can't tell you. So it's a formula that we have, and so that's proprietary information. I'm sorry, but I hope that you can use the resource though, which you can find on Cell Mentor's blog, and eventually you'll also find on our website as well.
Wonderful. So there's another question that came into the chat from Sarah. You mentioned the importance of leaky pipeline and how you focused on ages before undergraduate college. I've always been confused on higher levels, such as white males usually getting professorship, excuse me. Is there still an area that needs research, capturing students before they go to college?
Sure. Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes.
It looked like I was muted. I'm sorry. Yes, there's always a need for research, especially pre-college programs. I would suggest that if I'm understanding the question correctly, there's a lot of opportunities out there to do research on pre-college programs. Pre-college programs that we have held here on our campus have has resulted in great outcomes. What I mean by that, it actually helped pre-college programs actually prepare our students to enter into that next phase of their education career better than those who do not or who have not been exposed to the pre-college program. So to answer your question, yes, there's a great need to do such research.
Wonderful. I don't see any more questions at this time. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Please join us next Thursday at the same time, 11 o'clock a.m. Central, for Dr. Hinton and Dr. Shuler's presentation on how to be an effective mentor for underrepresented STEM trainees. Thank you all. Have a great day and happy National Mentor Month.